#live. Now, a lot of people watch our replays. If you're watching our replays, just type in #replay just so I know that you're watching.
Property guru George Markoski from Positive Property Solution joins us now. George, good morning to you.
How are you, George?
Our goal, our unstoppable mission is to empower 10,000 Australians to create financial freedom through investing in property using the Markoski method. Okay guys, we've got 10 seconds left. Can't wait to show you a great, amazing session tonight. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
No sound. Hello. Finally got sound.
Oh my goodness. Got you now.
I can't hear. We can't hear you, George. We can't hear you. You're talking like Humphrey B. Bear. That shows the older, mature audience out there. Thank you very much.
Okay, can you hear me now?
I can
We
hear
got you.
you.
Great, okay.
We got you.
Well, let's start again. Hello there, freedom fighters. I've been, my lips have been moving, but I think no sound has been going through.
Humphrey Bear.
Here we are, definitely. Now, we've got Paul coming live to us here. It's a bit squished, so I'm gonna kick you off.
You want me to get off, George? I can jump off now.
Yep, I will. Here we go. And we're back. So, hello, Paul, and welcome. Paul's coming to us live from Singapore.
Hey, George, good to be here eventually. For all of you who were suffering, wondering where the heck we were, my apologies for that, and thank you for your patience.
Yes, actually, we always start at 6:05 just in case, and it works really well. So,
Yeah.
I find a lot of times when you book someone in for an appointment, if you do 6:05 or 6:15, you've got much more chance of them rocking up on time.
George, I start all of my appointments at either 6:10, 6:20, well, 10 minutes after, 20 minutes after, 40 minutes after, or 50 minutes after. That's the only way to go.
Oh, high five. I love it. That's awesome.
There you go, my man.
Every time I talk to you, I find something new, and a lot of times something in common, which is amazing. So, which is great. Now, Paul, you head up B1G1.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And
Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Yeah. And B1G1, buy one, give one. It's part of the whole Build a Better World movement, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And of course, when it started, and by the way, just for everybody who's joining us, thank you so much for taking time out. I know you had a choice in order to do this, and I like to talk about choice and moments together because, where we are in our life right now is a result of, isn't it, all of the moments that we've experienced and the choices we've made. So hopefully, as a result of being together today, we can all make some great choices in these moments. But George, to get back to your point, yes, when the idea first came, it was this amazing idea that, wouldn't the world be a great place if every time business was done, something great happened in our world? And initially the idea was expressed as buy one, give one. But now, for example, if you and I were just talking on Zoom, I don't have it hooked up to this one, but if you and I were talking on Zoom right now, then just because we're talking, 8 kids would be getting access, I beg your pardon, 11 kids would be getting access to game-changing education. As you know, every time we exchange an email, kids get access to water. As you know, sometimes trees get planted. And just about 7 days ago, we crossed 250 million giving impacts in the world. So yeah, so B1G1 has been, it's historic in its application, its conception, and together we're doing great things. So yeah, so that's one of the reasons why it's a privilege to be chatting with you here.
Paul, $250 million. That's amazing. That is, so you've given away $250 million. That's huge.
Well, you know what? It's funny the way the power of words, isn't it? When we were tracking it, obviously we track it every day, as you know, because not only can you give from 1 cent in B1G1, but you can also it gets tracked automatically. And so we were tracking it and counting it, and we're going, 247 million, 248 million, and then 249. And I thought, wow, we could say it's 250 million, and that would be impressive. But a quarter of a billion sounds a hell of a lot more impressive.
It certainly does. It's huge. Yep, that's right. That's pretty exciting. That's amazing. So, Paul, you live in Singapore at the moment. How's Singapore going at the moment with the COVID and stuff? I'm just curious.
Well, thank you for being curious. Curiosity is a great thing. So yeah, it's going. Interestingly, the government finally. By the way, the government up here, there's no divisions. There's no. You want to wear a mask, you don't want to wear a mask. You this, you're left, you're right. No, we don't do that up here, which is kind of interesting. And it stops this whole judgment thing going on, right? So. And one of the things I think that we get is one of the big learnings, I think, from the pandemic is it's no longer about me, it's about us. And
Yes.
the government here sort of gets that. And anyway, they started off doing great things. They had a bit of a hiccup. And then about 13 weeks ago, I think it was, George, they made this observation. They said, you know what? I mean, you and I, George, when it first hit, we thought, it'll be here for 3 weeks, right?
Yep. Yeah, totally.
But the government has now made the observation that this is with us for in some way, shape, or form, and as long as we can make sure that and so people are, for whatever reason, they are going to get infected at some rate, but we can't sort of go, let's lock down, let's unlock, let's lock down, because businesses need certainty. And so what they've said is, provided we can be in a place where we're all safe, when anyone goes into hospital, first of all, they can get into hospital. Second of all, they can get awesome treatment. And so we're treating it like we would treat, for example, dengue or flu or something like that right now, and getting to that place. And I think that's a really important place to get to, because I think in these uncertain times, right, what we really need is certainty, right? So it's kind of nice to be here with all of that happening.
Look, I love the way you understand the psychology behind things, and you really can see behind what's going on, and totally amazing, because certainty is so important. And you look at Victoria, for example.
Yeah.
They've lost a lot of money. The CBD is gone down. All the commercial property has gone down. It's been terrible. That's because, you've got here in Australia, you've got all the premiers. They've got this big red button about this big in front of their desk, and they're itching to use it. And they're like, okay, lockdown, tricked you. So, I mean, for example, here in Adelaide, we're not locked down, which is great, which I'm really pleased. We've got one person with COVID.
Yeah.
We know where they are, but we all have to wear masks.
And we do too. Yep.
Okay. And I thought, one person, even if they had a gun, they probably couldn't find me here in Adelaide. But
well, it's interesting. I was talking to someone in Adelaide the other day, someone who does medical recruitment, and they had this really significant thing planned for Hobart. Their business is right across Australia, and the Sydney team were going to go and do this thing in Adelaide and bring people on board. And of course, all of a sudden, the Sydney people couldn't go. And so the only people that could go were actually the people from Adelaide. So yeah, it's kind of, and how do you juggle that? I mean, business is complex enough, without having all these jugglers, right?
It is. And look, when it first started, it was what's happened is most people have just started using Zoom. I don't think people are going to be in a big rush to go back to offices at all. And
well, let me tell you about Sorry, go ahead, George. Yeah, please go ahead. Go ahead.
I saw this trend coming along anyway because of technology. People are shopping at home. You're not going to the cinemas. You've got Netflix. But now people are working from home and they're used to Zoom. So when we first started, we want to do appointments over Zoom. People say, no, if it's not in person, it's not on. But now everyone accepts it. So we found everyone's accepting that technology. So it's made business actually easier. And there's a lot of companies in England, I know, around London, who telling their workers not to come back because
I think that's
international value from them being at home.
Internationally, yeah, and very much so. And of course, one of the interesting changes around that is the trust that has been sort of forced on people, which is interesting. But you're absolutely spot on. I mean, let me tell you, like a simple little personal experience, right? I have a son who's 17 years old, and people go, "Really, Paul? You must be a medical miracle." But anyway, I've got a son who's 17, and ever since he's 10 years old, George, I've never gone to a parent-teachers association, the meeting you have with the teachers, right?
Yep.
And the reason I've never gone is because you've got to give up an entire day. You've got to get in line outside the classroom, and then they've got to go and find the papers. They've got to do this. So you've got to give up a whole day, and it's very, very unfocused and all that kind of stuff. This year, guess what? I was there. Well, I wasn't there. I was there on Zoom.
Yes.
And the teachers were ready. They had all the stuff up, sharing their screen, sharing the screen about my son and all of this kind of stuff. I had my stuff up. And yeah, and you look at it and you go, well, why have we not been doing that forever? It's so simple.
Yeah, look, I think there's a lot of things happening. And I think luckily, fortunately, technology is jumping on board and helping us get through this. And back in, 1918, they didn't have technology to help them, and it was a lot more. That's why the Spanish flu was so much worse.
Exactly.
55 million people died from Spanish flu. It was terrible.
They did, and I think sometimes it's very important to say this some of the impacts we could absolutely live without, right? I mean, and so I don't want to minimize those impacts. But at the same time, I think you see really amazing things. I mean, just go back, you would remember this, about 8 or 9 months ago, you mentioned the United Kingdom a while back. You remember the whole story of Captain Tom? You remember Captain Tom, who was 100 years old, and he walked 100 meters about his thing, and he raised, what was it, $26 million for the health service, and became a hero, got to see the Queen, and all of that kind of stuff. That would have never happened. Never would that have happened. Never would people have realized that other people had issues, and never would they also understand that every single one of us is absolutely at our best when we're giving, right? And there was an opportunity to do it, and all of a sudden people felt great. The company, or the country rather, came together in a really interesting way. And I think, one of the things that and again, please, anybody who's been, has had some awful things happen in the pandemic, believe me, I'm not trying to minimize those at all. I'm just trying to say that when you look at it a slightly different way, stuff does happen, but you realize that there's really great things happening. And let me just mention one. If for a long time, George, that lots of people, and I'm one of them, are saying we've got to realize that we are all connected. We've got to realize that what I do to you, I do to me. We've got to realize that. Now, some people have challenges with that. However, what's the pandemic proven? We are all connected. You can't escape it.
Totally.
And so maybe we should start acting as if we are, right? And as I said before, moving from, this whole thing about the focus on me to the focus on we. And when we do that, stunning things start to happen in our own lives, in our communities, in our countries, and so on. It just that's how it is. Right? And sometimes it takes awful things for the learning.
Paul,
the important thing is, of course, that we do actually learn, right? That's the important thing.
Exactly. And look, Paul, I agree. I mean, I think giving is a human need.
Yeah, it is actually.
A lot of people don't realize that. And I think does this come, I'd imagine that when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that most people, not all, probably need to get up that ladder a bit first to be able to do the giving, right? But I've seen examples of people that doesn't matter where they are in that hierarchy give, and a lot of people right on the bottom of the hierarchy of Maslow's hierarchy are the biggest givers of all. So we can't say that. And I do believe that giving and gratitude, those two things are
well. Yeah, and George, I'm really happy to hear you say that other G word, the gratitude word, and because sometimes when you and I are talking about giving, some people joining us now, and again, thank you for doing it, by the way. They would think that when we talk about giving, we're talking about giving monetarily or something like that. Well, yes, that's true, but there's so many other forms of giving. For example, here in Singapore, I'm facing a forest right now, which is where I live, and people go, "You really? There are forests in Singapore?" Yes, and they got monkeys in the forest, and I run around it every day. That's another blessing of COVID, by the way.
That's awesome.
yeah, because until 2019 or in 2019, I did close to 600,000 air kilometers, right? And then March the 13th, bang, 0, as in 2020. So the benefit is, instead of running, on weekends or whatever, I'm running every day. I've lost, since I saw you last, actually, I've lost, someone said I shouldn't say lost. I should say I had released to the atmosphere 12 kilograms or something.
12 kilos, wow. Yes.
But anyway, here's the point about the forest. In between the forest and me, there is a bus. And in Singapore, the transport system is like amazing. I mean, it's not just a bus. There's a bus every 2 minutes, right? And so one of the things that happened during the pandemic, if you're a bus driver, you're effectively an essential worker. That's what you are. You're in the front line, if you're a bus driver. So I made an extra special, I was always doing it anyway, but I made an extra special thing. And when I get on the bus and, you have your little magnetic, well, actually I do it on my watch now, but you ping and there's the driver sort of sitting next to you, and increasingly, by the way, female drivers as well, which is really cool to see. And so what I do, I just stop as I ping my watch and I look at them and I make sure I've got the eye contact and I say, "Thank you for stopping." That's what I do. And they're like, what is this guy? But what I know is, and then they go, "Oh, well, that's okay." You can see the impact. And then when I get off the bus, I just wave and say, "Thank you, good ride." And I like to believe, and by the way, I feel great when I do that, which is really cool, right? But I like to believe that at some point the bus driver, when he gets home, says, "By the way, something really weird happened at bus stop 172 today. This kind of weird guy got on flash and watching. He says, 'Thank you for stopping.'" And so that's the other thing about the gratitude thing. It just becomes, a nice ripple effect. And so if you think about it again, remember I said a minute ago, we're all at our best when we're giving, right? And again, I don't want us to think about necessarily monetary or whatever, but how do you feel when there's someone, let's say it's the classic case of the old lady, struggling to get across the road, right? How do you feel when you help that person? The answer is you feel fantastic.
Yep, absolutely.
Now, she feels great. Right? And all it came from was, it's not about you, it's not about me, it's about us. And it just came from that spirit of recognizing that and then doing something. And by the way, George, just on that, I think there's another thing. I'm sorry to be rambling here, but I hope it's okay. But some people, and again, I don't want to minimize this, but a lot of people, for a lot of people, this is tough, right? I mean, for all sorts of reasons, this is tough, right? And sometimes we kind of lose our way. We guys, by the way, are very good at that. We lock ourselves in our mental cave and we don't communicate with the family and all of that kind of stuff because we're upset and we don't know how to deal with it and so on and so forth. And so what tends to happen is, and again, I don't want to, how should I say, I don't want to imply that I'm some trained psychologist or whatever, because I'm not. But what I know is that some people say things like, well, you've got to go inside. You've got to sort of go inside and find this kind of thing, right? Well, and I'm sure there's some sense in that. I'm sure there is. But what I know is when that happens to me, it's when I go outside, when I look at what's there, and I can go, oh, I can do something about that. I think I might be able to do something about that, or I know someone who can help with that. And it's that looking outside that becomes very, very interesting in terms of the value that we then give. And by the way, talking about value, pre-pandemic, it really was all about value. I think now subtle change, very subtle change. It's no longer, value is still important, but I think it's also about values. So it's like, what do you stand for, if you like? What are you going to stand up for, and so on. In fact, I think there's those of us listening now, and again, I'm really grateful for you being here. I hope it's not some old guy up there in Singapore who's prattling, but because I do get to do some fascinating things with growing businesses as well, as you know, George. And I was looking at it, and I came to this conclusion that there are two sorts of businesses. And by the way, I know which sort you are in just a minute, and everybody joining us will be able to pick which sort you are. So there's standard, run-of-the-mill standard,
Yep.
and there's stand out. Only two sorts: standard, stand out. So then the question becomes, well, how do you move to a stand out? What do you do? There's all sorts of things that you do, but let me give you the big thing that you do. There's a lovely alliteration in this. So you move from standard to stand out because you stand for something, something that is bigger than yourself, right? In your case, for example, there's something bigger than yourself is empowering people to do fascinating things with property so that their families benefit, their communities benefit, and eventually the world benefits from that as well, right? That's standing for, right?
That's right, exactly.
Yeah, and it's not about you, right?
No. Look, it always has to be bigger than you. Otherwise,
Exactly.
your dreams aren't big enough. And I think it's interesting. I feel like giving and gratitude has been inbuilt in us because it gives us so much pleasure. So It must have been a very good survival mechanism for the tribe. It's almost like group selection.
Well, it's interesting. Someone said to me, it's very interesting. In fact, I was working on this just before I joined you. Someone said to me a little while ago, about maybe 3 months ago now, they said, Paul, here's a quote for you. And so they gave me the quote. Here's the quote. Let me give it to you. And if we were on chat, you could sort of, well, I guess we are on chat, but if you might want to guess who said it. So here's the quote. Right? The first part of the quote you can largely ignore, but it's the second part that's the best part. So the quote is this: the storyteller is the most powerful person in the world. That bit you can just sort of accept that for a minute, but here comes the magic of the quote.
Yes.
The storyteller sets the vision, the values, and the agenda for an entire generation yet to come. Now, isn't that wow? Isn't that just so wow? Right?
That's right.
And what's interesting is, but here's what's interesting, right? Just take a look at you for example. Let's just look at stories, right? And by the way, the answer to who said it, I'm not sure if anyone got it, but it was Steve Jobs who said that.
Oh, Steve Jobs said that.
Yeah. So, but let's look at the quote again, and then we'll come back and look at what's going on. So the quote says, the storyteller sets the vision, get that, the values, and the agenda. Okay? But the next bit is really cool. For an entire generation yet to come. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is because you just mentioned something about it's inbuilt into our DNA. And I think that stories are actually inbuilt into our DNA as well. Because we sit on grandma's knee and grandma says, once upon a time, and all of a sudden we learn.
Well, that was a way of passing on knowledge in the past anyway, wasn't it?
Exactly so.
Metaphor and song and dance.
Exactly so. So let's look at you as a good example of that thing. So some people, if you think about some people, their life story, if you like, the story that they're living is not necessarily their best life right now, right? Because they might be doom scrolling or whatever else it is, that you do to get angry at things and everything else, right? So they come, they listen to you, and they listen to your story. And if you read your books, read George's book, it's all about a story. It's all it is. Here's what I did. It's a story. And then we get inspired by that story, and as a result of that story, we change our story. Does that make sense? We
Yes.
change our story. But then guess what happens? Because we change, remember the bit about an entire generation yet to come? So because we change our story, it's our children's children. It's not just our children who are sitting on our knee and hearing the story of what we did. It's their children's children.
Wow,
So isn't it powerful?
Yeah, very
It's
powerful.
really, really, really very powerful. Yeah.
Exactly. And look, lots of people give themselves the wrong story because, and I was saying this when the pandemic hit, I said there's going to be two types of people at the end of this. People are going to say, wow, COVID-19 pandemic made who I am, and the ones that said it destroyed me. And it's our choice whether we write the narrative of all this, of all our stories. And
well, that's exactly right. It is a conscious choice. Remember what we said before, that it is the reaction to the moments in our life, and it's pretty simple. We can choose to be the victim, or we can choose to co-create something extraordinary.
absolutely.
I mean, is it today or tomorrow? Sometime this week, the Paralympics are starting.
Yes.
You want to be inspired?
I reckon, absolutely.
Go there. It's and we all have that capacity. In fact, my daughter knows a guy. I forget his last name now, but his first name is Logan. And talking about the Olympics, and he was the gold medal in the was it skateboarding? Yes, in the skateboarding where they go, what up those things? It's like the guy's the gold medal, and
wow.
his and he lives in Queensland. Why is he called Logan?
I watched Logan. I remember.
Yeah, why is he called Logan? Because he was born in this really tiny little place. And his mum, I don't know whether he was like a wanted babe or not, but what I do know is his mum thinks, oh, what am I going to call him? Well, I'm living in Logan. I'll call him Logan.
Wow. What a great name. Love it.
Yeah.
BMX.
And then
BMX.
I beg your pardon. It was the BMX. Thank you. Yes,
wow.
It was the BMX.
I love the simplicity and the authenticity of that name. It's
yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah. Wow. It is. And, he put his mind to it and he quit doing all the things that lots of teenagers do, but had some fun and, bang, there's a gold medal now, inspiring, hopefully, lots of others. So what has he done?
And him being a gold medalist,
he's changed, exactly. He's changed his story.
He might even change people's names because some people are going to say, wow, let's call our kid Logan. And before you know it, Logan becomes a popular name.
All of a sudden there'll be lots of Logans or lots of people called Adelaide because of the great things you're doing in Adelaide. But you see the point is he chose to change his story.
He did, exactly. Exactly. Which is
and
great.
We all can do that. We all can do that.
So you've got B1G1.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit more about Buy One, Give One, because it's an amazing program and also makes it easy for businesses to give impact in an easy way that's measurable, which is excellent.
Oh, yeah. I was on a program a couple of weeks ago, a couple of days ago actually, where we were talking about that new IPCC report. The one that said, "Hey, we're not kidding about climate change." That one, right?
Yep.
And so now in B1G1, it's just so simple for every single one of us to offset our carbon footprint. Just so easy. Like for example, okay, just recently there's a whole bunch of what would you call them, service stations, workshops, in Australia, who realize that, when they change the oil in your car and all that kind of stuff, what they do is they kind of dump that, right? Because you've got to get rid of it somewhere. And so all of a sudden they're going, that's not a good thing. So let's join B1G1. So what we now can do is we can make sure that every time someone comes in and gets their car done or whatever, we're automatically planting trees. And by the way, one of the problems with trees is, and trees are lovely, trouble is it takes them a few years, right, until they start to sequester, the carbon. So what else can we do? Well, we can think about families whose kids are going to school, but they're having to walk 20 kilometers to school. So we can think of, why don't we get a bike, which, by the way, costs 4 cents to do in B1G1. And when the kids get home, guess what? There's no power. So let's provide them with some solar stuff, which is a little better than providing them with, like burning stuff and everything else.
Yeah, burning stuff's not good for health or the environment.
Not exactly right. So
at the same time, which is great.
Yeah, and so the ability, exactly, and so the ability to be able to do that. By the way, kids absolutely get it. There's this. I'm not sure I told you the story, but there's this lady. In fact, I haven't told you the story because I remember when I last met you, and it happened after that. I was doing a program actually down in Melbourne. It was the day before I got the last flight kind of thing, right? And this lady had joined B1G1 together with a whole bunch of people. And the guy running the event the next day, this lady lived in Melbourne, but there were people from around the world there. And the next day, the host begins the session and he says, okay, everybody, wasn't that great yesterday? At your tables, just get together and talk about what the big idea was yesterday. So everybody's going, okay, he says, you've got 5 minutes and everything else. So then the 5 minutes are up. And he says, okay, let's begin over here. And he points to the left-hand table. And he says, to everybody at the table, he says, point to the person who had the most inspiring story. So they point, this lady's name is Lisa, and she's really embarrassed, right? And so the host says, so Lisa, what happened? She said, well, the program was really great yesterday. It really was good. I learned so many things. But, when Paul was doing the whole B1G1 thing, that was like, wow, it was really cool. And so I joined B1G1. And then I went home at night because I live here in Melbourne. And we were just sitting around just having dinner. And I told my family, I said, guess what? We now can do this. And everyone said, oh, that's very cool. And then after dinner, or at the end of dinner, she looks at her son Daniel, who's 10 years old, and says, oh, Daniel, it's your turn to do the washing up. And Daniel gets this look on his face, right? The sort of look that a 10-year-old would give if they had to do the washing up. And so she says, oh, look, I can create an account for you on B1G1. And look at this. We can say, when Daniel washes the dishes, and then you can choose, what you want. So, and she says, oh, look at this. When Daniel washes it, we can do 11 or 7 or 3. People will get access to life-changing water. So do you reckon that'd be a good one? Oh, yeah, says Daniel. She's telling the story, right? And then so Daniel puts it in, and he says to his mum, by the way, is that coming out of my pocket money or you pay that? She says, we'll talk about that later. That was a year ago, right? A little more than a year ago. And the good news is, has not been any challenge since in Daniel doing the washing up, right? Wow. Why? Because he's got something great happening as a result of doing something. Yeah. So
that's fantastic. Great to hear. Yeah, look, when I first saw you present and talk about B1G1, I was like, wow, this is amazing, because as a business, it's really hard. You get people calling you saying, do you want to donate to this or that? You don't know how much is going there. No one's vetted it, nothing else like that. But one thing about being part of your program is very simple and easy. Because what we do is everyone that does our 14-day challenge, they get 10 bricks towards a house in Cambodia. And then if they every time someone settles on a property, they get 1,000 bricks. Now, I think to build a whole school's just over 5,000 bricks in a country.
That's about right. Depends on the country, but you're right. You can do that.
Yep. So that's right, because I know in Africa that's about 5,000 bricks. So that means someone on our total 10-year program to get 10 properties, they can actually build 2 schools in
Get it.
Cambodia while
Got it.
they're
Exactly
investing
right.
in property here. Now, so I'm really proud of that, because every person that joins our company, they are building schools and doing that. And the reason we chose building a school is because, one, property and education, those 2 things sort of fit beautifully what we do. But
Yeah, exactly right.
I do want to look into other ways of giving for different things as well, because I want to try to mix it up and have a bit more fun.
Yeah, and then, by the way, talking mixing it up, there's now a project, a new project where it's amazing what people do. Amazing what people do, and it has to do with building schools. And what they figured out was they could collect. How cool is it? They could collect plastic from the ocean,
Yep.
and then they could process that, and they could create plastic bricks. And now you can build the school with the plastic bricks, which takes much less time. They're more stable and so on and so forth. So, yeah, it's taking. But and by the way, George, as a result of some of the things that you've been doing, there are. So let's just say there are some new. We call them global projects, which enable you to do shelter, if you like, in really really interesting ways. So thank you for being a sort of a cheerleader and a real leader in terms of making that stuff happen, right? And it's something that you can feel, really awesome about, because it just gives you, I mean, such a. By the way, what I was about to say was it sort of gives you a good feeling. And what's so interesting is when people think about giving, they frequently think that it is the beneficiary who is getting the benefit. Okay, they're getting school. What they tend to forget is, in fact, when you do it, guess what? The benefit is to you, right? It's actually
Absolutely.
absolutely, yeah.
Yes, no, I totally agree, and I think maybe a lot of people don't realise that, and some people do. But the benefit's totally yours, absolutely, and it's a beautiful thing. Nothing wrong with that. And the thing I was going to say is, if we build the school in Cambodia, can we actually go and have a look at it?
Yes, you can. Of course, you can. When they let you in, right?
Okay, yeah, okay, great. Because I love
In
Cambodia.
fact, that's one of the things. That's one of the things we miss. We haven't been able to do it, obviously, for the last couple of years. But we have B1G1 study tours where we. And by the way, I want you to notice every listening. I want you to notice what I said. I said B1G1 study tours, and the reason we call them study tours is we don't want the whole thing. And lots of charity things, you've got to raise lots of money in order to get on the, all of that sort of stuff. And there's probably a place for that, but in you don't have to do that, because the thing that we don't want to do is kind of think of ourselves as, oh, we're the guys with the money and we know the answers and here's what you do, right? Because that's BS. I mean, that is seriously BS.
Totally.
And when you see what these people are doing and the way in which they're doing it, it's like, oh my God, it's like it's just amazing. And that's when you get that extra sort of life-changing bit, if you will, when you can see all of those sorts of things happening. And by the way, interestingly enough, you mentioned Cambodia. There's a circus up in Cambodia which is called Phare, Phare. Go look it up. And what they do, they're not. I shouldn't say this. What they do is they take 1,200 every year. They take 1,200 school kids, and they put them into a performing arts thing. And they teach them how to do things, and then they take the best 50 of that, and the best 50 get to go in this circus, which is called Phare. If ever you go to Siem Reap, the thing you must do is go see Phare, Phare. It's amazing. But guess what? No one's been able to go to the circus, right? No one's been able to, right? So you know what they did? I mean, how's this? They decided that what they would do is they would set out to create a Guinness Book of Records for the longest running circus performance ever, right? So these kids did 28 solid hours, right? On Facebook Live, kind of thing like this, right? And in order to inspire people and all of that kind of stuff. And one of the things we did they did a special thing for us in B1G1 where we had a conference recently, or a virtual one. We were all in on that conference and just explaining it. And then the next day, we went to a place where, again, in Cambodia, sorry, this was in Vietnam, in Hanoi, where this is really dangerous work that they do, but they're amazing. It's called Blue Dragon. And what they do is they rescue trafficked kids. Okay?
Wow, that would be very dangerous.
And it's amazing how the things you can do to support that. By the way, in B1G1. Anyway, so we couldn't go, right, because we were going to have a real live convention there, and Blue Dragon, we were going to visit. So you know what the kids did? This is what the kids did. They said, "Well, we would love to do it virtually, and so what we're going to do is we're going to teach everybody how to make real Vietnamese spring rolls." So what they did, everybody who registered, they sent out the menus. The list of ingredients and all that kind of stuff, and then we virtually got to go on it. And what was so interesting, George, the most interesting thing was I'm looking at all of the B1G1 members from around the world who are there, virtually. And the thing that I noticed, and it was this particular one, was at 6 o'clock on a Saturday, my time. So 6 o'clock Sydney time was on a Saturday. And I noticed that the B1G1 members were very smart. And you know what they've done? What most of them did, almost all of them, got their own kids to be a part of learning how to make these Vietnamese spring rolls.
What a great idea.
With the kids. And you know what happened? When we finished, it was so cool. And of course, then and this gets back to what we were talking about before. All the emails start to, come in and people say that was great. And I remember this one lady, her name is Karen, and she said, that was just a great experience. And then she said this. She said, she said, our family needed that. And I thought, isn't that wow? And that's just this experience that we all need of being connected. Right? That's the experience that we need. And and so the moment that we feel that, then it just becomes one of those, it becomes part of the story. Okay, and it's those stories that we then tell, just like I'm telling you that story now. Right? So.
Yeah, that was a great story. Love it. And look, I suppose there's one thing a lot of people have missed out on, especially people stuck in Melbourne with all the lockdowns, is connection, because they've had 200 days of lockdown in Melbourne. So that'd be pretty hard. You'd be getting a bit of
It's so true. And that's one of the reasons why, Zoom is a great place to get on and do the best we can to connect. And by the way, if there is anyone joining us from Melbourne right now, thank you so much for being here. I know it's not easy. But again, it's like, we have this opportunity to reach out, to connect in like here and so on. I like what my fellow TED speaker, some of us would know Brene Brown, right?
Yep.
And you probably watched, Brene on her Netflix thing and everything. And one of the great things about being a TED speaker is you get to meet your fellow TED speaker. So I've met Brene. She's really quite amazing. And if anybody, even now, right, you want to go back and see Brene's first TEDx, first TED talk, and it's called Vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
And Brene is a lot of fun, right? She's really funny. And there's this point, I think from memory, George, it's at about 6 minutes, 30 seconds or something like that, where she talks about something that's happening in her life. And she really gets quite serious. And she gives this line. She says this, listen to this. She says, connection is why we're here. Mm-hmm. And then she continues, it's that gives meaning and purpose to our lives. So here's the challenge that we have to be careful of, right? So just go with the sentence again. Connection is why we're here. It's that gives meaning and purpose. So if you take away the connection, you may be taking away the meaning and purpose. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes
exactly
sense.
Right.
Yep.
So if you go back to the story I was telling you before about what happens is we tend to look inside as opposed to outside,
Yep.
then when we're in those moments that, we're going, oh my God, what is this all about? And we're kind of losing that sense of meaning and purpose. Guess what? Just reach out. Just reach out to somebody, and
Yep.
connect in whatever way you can. Just connect. Or alternatively, make yourself available to be the connection point, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of people lost connection because of COVID, and I think it's important to be able to do that.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so one of those things. Wow, that was pretty deep. It was good. It was excellent.
Oh, well, hopefully there was some ideas in there that people might want to add to their stories, and maybe those of you who, again, I'm very grateful that George, first of all, that you reached out and said, "Can we do this?" And secondly, I'm very grateful for the people on your network and your group that did this. So a big thank you to Asher for making it happen. And hopefully, it becomes part of your story. Like, you'll remember and be able to tell somebody, hey, guess what? I was on this thing, and there was this guy who says thank you to a bus driver. Are you going to be kidding me? So, or whatever, or ratchet up a little bit. Or there's this guy that whenever you sell a property, someone else gets part of a home somewhere. How cool is that? What that is doing is really moving us from, it's not about me anymore. It's got to be about we. And that's the game changer. That really is the game changer, which means it's not about dividing. It's about coming together. It's not about judging. It's about respecting and all of those sorts of things. And bang, as a result, hopefully lovely things happen. So I just hope that as we get through this, we don't sort of say, oh, when will we get back to normal, right? Because maybe that normal, I know a lot of people who are saying, I don't think I should get back on track because maybe the track that I was on was not actually the best track. And this has given me an opportunity to reflect on that. Yeah.
Let's get a new track, a better one. Now, guys,
Yeah, there you go.
We've got a few more minutes. If anyone's got any questions for Paul, please type them in now, because this is going to be your opportunity before we finish. And so thanks, Paul. Love what you're sharing. Excellent. Thank you. But if anyone's got any questions,
thank you, guys.
Yeah, so I saw a funny tweet shared today about it says, if you ever feel useless, just remember USA took 4 presidents, trillions of dollars, millions of lives, 20 years to replace Taliban with Taliban.
Oh God. People will always find something, won't they?
They will. I mean, it's been a long exercise of throwing out the Taliban to get them back in.
Yeah. By the way, all the and I can only see on my version of the chat it says Facebook user. So whoever you are, Brene Brown is great. She really is great. And yes, I love what PPS are doing, building schools. Thank you for the thing about Logan and BMX and stuff. Yeah, really good. By the way, interesting story about that. Interesting story.
Yeah.
You would also know, right? And I'm sure you, George, studying property and everything else, when Brisbane was awarded the Olympics, right?
Yes.
I some people who are in real estate like you in B1G1, they call and say, oh my goodness, that's amazing. People selling property just put their prices up 10% because in 2032 we're going to have the Olympics. But what's interesting about that is some of you may remember Natalie Cook. Right? Natalie was the beach volleyball person, right? And I think she's now a 7 times Olympian. And she was one of the people who was playing a part in the bid, right, to get the thing for Brisbane. Yeah. And I've known Nat for a number of years, and she told me a story that I never knew. And the story is this: you know how you imagine the beach volleyball, right? And so when you knock the ball and it goes out, right? Just you knock it straight out. That's like, oh no, what do I do that for? And you start beating yourself up. She said her mindset coach taught her and actually worked at it. He was standing on the lines when she was practicing, and every time she knocked the ball out, she would go, winner! just like this.
Wow. Okay.
And she said, it freaked the opposition like you would not believe. And I think that's the reason why we won 5 goals.
That is amazing. What a great story. I wonder if the
Yeah.
psychology of that works, the whole winner thing. You know, instead
Well, you know, another friend of mine, you would have seen that TED talk where it's all about, you know, making the general in the US who says, you know, to start your day, you should make the bed. And I've started, believe it or not, you know, a friend of mine started doing this with his kids. And okay, personal story. Yes, I do this now. So I make the bed in the morning, and here's what I do. Went up! Seriously.
I love it.
Just because I did.
I take a cold shower instead. So
Oh, George. One day I'm going to be able to do that. I have, you know what?
Yeah.
I have a Japanese father-in-law. Okay.
Yep.
And my Japanese father-in-law, one of the things you're supposed to do with your father-in-law, and when you go to Japan, is you're supposed to go to the springs, you know, the bath thing, right? And of course, what the Japanese do, they got the steam baths and everything else, and then you plunge into this ice cold thing, right? So here's my father-in-law, and it's time for me to jump in. And you know, he's been talking about his friends, and you know, he's my son-in-law and everything else. And George, I am standing. Oh my God, there's no way I'm going to jump into this thing. But then all of a sudden you realize that's going to let down your father-in-law. So off you go and you jump in.
Oh, you jumped in. Awesome. Good work. Good work.
Yeah. So lots of fun, right? Lots of fun.
Excellent. Well, one last question before we go.
Yeah.
What would be your top 3 words of wisdom? I'm going to just cut out wisdom because I think that's a good, or 3, you know.
Well, you used one of them, and I was going to go off on that riff. Actually, you used one of them right up front, and it was the word curious. You know, people. That's one. I think that's what keeps me going. I'm also impressed by Zig Ziglar, who was 83 years old, and someone said, "Zig, you're 83 years old. Don't you think it's time you should slow down?" And Zig looks at him and he says, No. He said, I should speed up because I got less time left than you.
That is brilliant. I love it.
So I think you know, the whole curiosity thing, the whole thing, and because that sort of powers so much. And I also think, you know, some of the things that we've shared today is important. But I think this one, if there was one sort of, it's not a word necessarily, but it's a phrase. And I'm grateful to getting this phrase. And George, you know, that, remember the quote I gave you about stories, right? It's sort of like that, and it goes like this. It says, when you get a little older, like me, you can worry about your memory sometimes, right? So mine is good, thank goodness, but I think it's because I'm curious. So it says, when your vision becomes more powerful than your memory, your future becomes more powerful than your past.
Wow, love that. That's brilliant.
You got that one? So yeah, put it all together and you know, and go for it. And the other word I would use, of course, is one that we've used throughout our time together. And again, thank you for it. Is that G word? You know, the gratitude word. That's just, it's amazing what flows from that. It absolutely is amazing.
Well, I must say, I'm very grateful for you to come and join us. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone else that joined us. And also,
thanks everybody.
And also the people listening on the podcast afterwards and on YouTube. Thank you so much. We're going to get going into the private group now. I'll join you on Zoom.
Okay. George,
Cheers.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Bye.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Wait. Someone said, I'm in awe. Beautiful. Very nice.